Daryl Recommends Podcast is a podcast recommending series and shouldn't be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each share my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
Detective Samuel Bailey, Oslo County Police Department, Homicide Division. Recording on April 1st, 2019 at 1:05 p.m. Before I get started, there's just one thing I need to say. I have absolutely no patience for the unexplained, or the things people call unexplainable, supernatural, or paranormal. That's all just a lazy way of saying that the real explanation is too difficult, or too horrible for them to accept. I don't have that luxury. My job is to look the facts dead in the face and find an explanation, one that will hold up in a court of law. And the simplest explanation is almost always the right one. There's no place for ghost stories and close encounters in this investigation, or any other. Hopefully that explains my
Anna Sheridan has been
outburst.
missing for 6 months when Sam Bailey was put onto her case. Armed only with tapes Anna recorded before her disappearance, Sam digs deep into the missing author's life. What he finds leads him down a mysterious path that only becomes more dangerous. The Sheridan Tapes is a 100-episode mystery horror podcast with bonus episodes set inside the universe. It is a well-paced mystery that leaves you hanging right up to the very end, and oh boy, does it leave you hanging up to the very end. And I don't mean as in like a kind of way where you're confused about what's going on right up into the end, but just the show does a very good job at just feeding you enough information to let you know what's going on, but while also keeping enough of the mystery contained that until the very end of the mystery, we don't really know all the details. And then like even after like the big question, which is what happened to Anna Sheridan, is answered, and we get to the part where we like get more into that and like what exactly like the details of her disappearance were, and the twist that follows with that is done so good because there's even more questions that get answered after that. And it's just one of these, this is like a show I would use as an example of like a well-written, well-paced mystery. It's very, very hard to write a mystery for such a long, like, for a very long time, for like a long piece of media, because this podcast is 100 episodes, and it manages throughout the whole show keep its mystery, like the question that it asks at the very beginning of the podcast, keep that question a mystery until the very end of the podcast. And I think just how this show decides to do that is so well done. It's so well put together, especially when like originally Trevor Van Winkle, the creator of the show, was talking about how they originally were planning on it only being just the first season until they expanded it onto the rest of the other seasons. And I'm really glad that they did. I know that in one of their Q&As they mentioned that it definitely became a more interesting story, and I 100% agree that it became a more interesting story. Even though it would have been a good story even if they ended at season 1, I definitely think this story gets so good the farther you get into it. I was gushing about this while I was binge listening to it. I started it about like a couple episodes before the series finale, so I caught up just after the last episode came out. I had a mutual on Tumblr who was doing their own live blogging through the show, and I kept seeing their posts, and I kept avoiding reading them because I was like, no, this is a show I had on my to-listen-to list that I don't want to listen to it now. But eventually I was like, oh, well, the show is going to end, so I might as well listen to it now because I need something new to listen to. And one of the things that the show did was it scratched that kind of itch in my head I didn't know I had until it scratched it, and I was like, oh yes, this is exactly what I needed in my audio fiction right now. Just chef's kiss, delicious, beautiful. I'm being fed via audio, and I needed to keep coming. Thank you very much. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Virginia. Virginia's the other writer on the show, and she also voices Kate Sheridan. So yeah, there's like the one of the other things I really like too is that all the characters are so well done, even like the minor characters. This isn't a show with a huge cast of characters, but like everybody who plays a significant portion of the story is at least given enough time for us to understand them. And I think that's really cool. Like, characters I didn't care about that were introduced in season 1. I wouldn't say care about, but like weren't like, you know, kind of met with, because they came up so briefly in season 1, but then get more depth into the like later seasons. Like, definitely it was so good. It's done so well. And the characters are written so great. And I love it. I love how well-rounded everybody is. And the characters are just so fascinating between the minor characters and the major characters. And I love it a lot. The like main cast is so good. I'm sorry. Ned became like that one character who I wasn't expecting to like absolutely fall in love with, and then did, and I was like, oh, this guy is great. This guy is awesome. And same with Amanita. Amanita is my mushroom wife. She is probably my favorite. I love her so much. And Sam too. Like, I gotta gush a little bit about Sam, because one of the things that I really liked with Sam's story is Sam like just becomes like a well-rounded character, and much of season 1 focuses mostly on him and Anna, because we're learning about Erin of Sheridan and what she was up to before her disappearance as a horror writer who traveled around the country and was also investigating paranormal experiences and writing books based off of her experiences. We also learned so much about Sam in the beginning, because at the beginning he's like this like detective, he's very angry, he's an asshole, he's really mean to his partner Bill. He just like is so like such a dick, and like I love these kind of characters, because it's just like I know this isn't going to be like the kind of character we're going to be dealing with through the whole show, and it's just like the character that came to mind when like it's like listening to the first half of season 1 with listening to like Sam and how Sam was dealing with stuff, was like, reminded me a lot of season 1 Jonathan Sims from the Magnus Archives. Not in like personality, but rather in just like behavior. And then like learning about Sam and why he is the way he is, and seeing him develop past that. So good. It is so good. It's done so good. I love Sam's development in this. I love his whole storyline when it comes to grief and finding family. And it's just so well done. It is incredibly well done. And I'm sorry though, going back to Anna, who is another character that season 1 focuses a lot on, and then the show like gradually goes more into like her whole deal, because adding on to that mystery, Anna's living my dream life. I'm sorry. If I could like spend my life just freelance driving around, working on my little horror comics and exploring paranormal places in my van, I would totally go and do that. Unfortunately, I live in the real world, and that is not realistic, but I wish I could. And it just, it's so good. It's such a good show. All these characters are so good. I love all of them. And, like, it's cool because it does the tape recorder format, but it also goes into other audio formats, such as with, like, there's a couple episodes where all the, like, audio is recorded through body footage because, you know, there's police officers. So a couple of times they're wearing body cameras. Then there's other times where we're hearing stuff going on, but the actual conversation isn't being recorded. And just, like, there was, like, one episode where, like, half of it was, like, a podcast episode of another podcast. They did, like, a Welcome to Nightville thing where they got, like, another actual podcast to, like, come on and, like, do an episode in-universe. And they even did collaborations. There's, like, one monster storyline that, like, never really gets, like, it's, like, mentioned a lot in season 1. And then we get one episode where we kind of, like, get an ending for that monster, and it never shows up. And then they did a crossover episode with the SCP Archives, which is a podcast I have previously recommended, and I do recommend it if you want to get into that, because it's a good show. Or if you have not, if you're on the fence about it, listen to this bonus episode they did with them, where they took that monster storyline and they continued it into the SCP Archives universe, and it's so good. It's like one of those things where it's like you don't really need that story expanded on, but it's also a cool way that they expanded on it. Very much like a fan in AU. That's what it felt like to me, but it's very good. It's a good episode. I would recommend it if you want to get into the SCP Archives, but are going to get into the Sheridan tapes. And of course, with all the podcasts I talk about, one of the things that this show is really cool with is its queer representation. It has, like, basically most of the cast, if not the whole cast, is queer in some form or flavor. And it's just the ace rep in this is so good. I love the ace rep in this. And I'm gonna say a spoiler for the very last episode, so if you don't want a spoiler, skip the next 15 seconds in 3, 2, 1. I have never had a podcast that has ended with an actual polycule compound. That took me for a loop. Not in a bad way. I loved it. I love that they did that, but I just thought it was so fucking funny when they got to that. And here's the thing, is it made sense. It made sense. So it's just like, oh, I love the way that the show does queer relationships, especially with like some of the themes with some of the characters dealing with their own personal, relational problems with each other, and it's just done so well. I love all of it like together. And of course the show is very much just like shit talking cops. Which is funny because like half of their cast is like ex-police officers, but it's just really funny. I do want to say though, because this is a horror podcast, generally content warning wise, it's, you know, your general horror topics. You got your scary stuff, occasional gore, not very much, but it does have individual episode. Every episode has content warnings on it. So if you're somebody who like has specific stuff in horror or just specific topics you tend to avoid, they're very good at tagging their content warnings. They say it in the episode before the episode starts, and they even put it in the description. I listen on Spotify, so that's how, whenever I'm referencing these things, I need you guys to know that this is via Spotify. But if you ever want to, if you have a topic you want to avoid, you could just take a look into the description. But overall, I love this show. It has probably one of the things with it, too, because I didn't really get much into the horror. The horror is very much, indescribable eldritch horror. There's some stuff in it that's not very much in the vein of indescribable. There obviously is, stuff that's a little bit more coherent than just being, I don't know how to describe this horrific thing that's happening. But it does indescribable eldritch horror, probably the best I have ever seen. And it stays indescribable, and it stays horrifying, without, needing so much of an explanation that it's you could just be this is this thing. How does it work? I don't fucking know, but it exists. Hey! And it's just great. And sometimes, one of the things that I love about it too is it dwells a lot into the kind of horror that I've only rarely ever seen in the SCP universe, with impossible spaces. It's very hard to describe, but I love that kind of horror, and it's there's a very specific niche part of that horror I really like, and this goes a bit into it. So I really enjoy that from it. It's one of the things that I adore about this show. Is it's the only other show besides I say show because my SCP stuff is from the SCP archives, because I don't have time to read the whole wiki. So, but when I'm talking about SCP in general, and then I'm saying show, I mean SCP in general, not just the SCP archives. I need to clarify that. But yeah, it's the horror is just so done. The mystery is so done. Its plot twists work. I don't like it when a plot twist doesn't work and doesn't make sense. The show does have a ton of plot twists, but they actually do work and make sense. And it hangs on to the details of its main mystery right up to the end. And sometimes it gets to points where it kind of is just hey, have we forgot about the main mystery? But the funny thing is the characters of the show are hey, have we forgot about the main mystery? Why are we doing all this other shit? And I think that's kind of funny that they're very self-aware about that, so it doesn't feel like, oh yeah, we have this one mystery, but the authors are never going to get into that, because they do. Of course we're going to find out what happens to Anna Sheridan, because the show literally wouldn't have happened without Anna Sheridan. So you kind of have to give them a moment if you get annoyed with the fact that they're okay, well they're off doing this thing, it has little to do with Anna, so why are we still focused on Anna? And it's well, there's an answer for that, because the characters are just as mad about it as you are. And it's just one of the things that I like too, is it does have the hero in it, the villain in it. I don't like the main antagonist. He is an awful person. His voice actor is so fucking good though, but the character, I want to punch him so bad. But it does have a very good villain to hero arc, not with the main antagonist, different character. You'll understand when you guys listen to it, but it's just so good. It's so good. It's a 10 out of 10 show. and I highly recommend it if you love indescribable eldritch horror, if you want something that's like refreshing, if you want a different kind of like horror from like the usual just like Monster Madness or Ghosts Everywhere kind of show. It gets very good. It's just an interesting show, and I love this. It was like a nice refreshing take on horror that I was just listening to it and savoring the audio like a fine food connoisseur, but imagine if it was audio instead of food. That was me listening to this show. So, outside of that, I am going to be linking to all relevant websites. Unfortunately, I didn't do it prior to recording this. I sometimes forget to do it until I get to this part in my outline. But I will be linking websites down below, Twitter, Patreon, all that jazz. I know they have a Patreon, so that definitely will be linked down below. They are doing bonus episode stuff too, so, you can go on there and check that out. And if you have a podcast for me to listen to, go ahead and leave it down below. I am interested in anybody's recommendation, and if I don't get to it next, it definitely will be at least on the link. The list. Not the link. The list. And I have my own social media accounts. You can follow me everywhere. I even have a Patreon too, so if you want to check my Patreon out, feel free to do it. I upload pages 2 weeks early of my the other way around, queer horror webcomic In Harmony. I am about halfway through drawing the chapter, so I have updates ready all the way up until September. So you guys will be fed fresh, beautiful pages of comic that I work super hard on if you join it. And as always, goodbye. I'll talk to you later. Please go listen to the Sheridan tapes and tell me what you think about it. Bye.